Hello. Today we're going to look at chapter 29 of the Tao Te Ching, which I titled Not of the World. This is the Regina Akers translation of that chapter. There are those who want to take over the world and control it. I understand they will not succeed. The world is a sacred vessel, and it cannot be controlled. Those who try to control it will be defeated. Those who try to hold it will lose it. In this world, perhaps there are leaders and followers. Perhaps some snort with displeasure and some boast with pride. Perhaps some struggle and some gain. Perhaps some are oppressed and some conquer. To be not of the world, sages remove their own extremes. Sages remove their own extravagance. Sages remove their own arrogance. So it's interesting, going back to the top, this says there are those who want to take over the world and control it. I understand they will not succeed. Well, certainly throughout the history of mankind, and even right now, as I'm speaking on the planet, it does seem to be that there are those who have wanted to take over the world and control it. They invade neighboring countries, and if they're successful there, they invade further. And sometimes it looks like they're successful. But if you really look, they're only successful temporarily. No one has ever conquered the world and then held that power of position. At some point, things go back into balance. And that's really what this particular chapter of the Tao is telling us. There are those who want to take over the world and control it, right? They're out there. And even in a smaller way, there may be those who want to take over the department you work in and control it, or those who want to take over the family and control it, right? There are certainly people who have a desire to control. They're out there. There are those who want to take over the world and control it, but this is the important line. I understand they will not succeed. And again, even if they have the temporary appearance of succeeding, if you really look at it over the long run, no one succeeds at controlling and maintaining control. No one succeeds at controlling and maintaining control. Why? Well, the next line says, the world is a sacred vessel and it cannot be controlled. There's the why. One thing that I thought was really interesting was the word for word Chinese translation of that particular line. The whole world God tool, or it could say the whole world spirit tool. I said the world is a sacred vessel. The Chinese characters said the world is God's tool, or the world is spirit's tool. So what that seems to say is there is something beyond man at work here. And it is more powerful than any man. or any group of men or any political party. And so, although there may be the appearance, the temporary appearance of someone taking over and controlling it, it's not going to be maintained because the world does not belong to them, and the world will never belong to them. The world belongs to God or Spirit or the Tao. The world is a sacred vessel, and it cannot be controlled. Those who try to control it will be defeated. Those who try to hold it will lose it. Now, the next set of lines talk about what appears to be true in the world. Perhaps there are leaders and there are followers. That's what it looks like. Perhaps some snort with displeasure. They're never satisfied. And perhaps some boast with pride. They're so proud of their accomplishments. Perhaps some struggle and some gain. Just going to lower my blind for a second. The sun is coming out. There we go. Perhaps some struggle, work hard, don't ever seem to be getting ahead. And there are others who gain. They seem to easily become wealthy, easily become successful. Perhaps some are oppressed. And perhaps there are some who do conquer. That if you look out at the world right now, you can see all of that. But also, if you pay attention to the world, you'll notice the world is a constant place of change. And so positions are shifting and changing all of the time. In fact, the way some people would have translated this was more like there's a time to lead and a time to follow. There's a time to snort with displeasure and a time to boast with pride. There's a time to struggle and a time to gain. There's a time to be oppressed and a time to conquer. What that really means is all these appearances are shifting and changing. Although you can look in the world and see all of these things, what the true enlightened master sees, when the true enlightened master looks at the world, is the Tao, is spirit. I can't remember if I told this story in this series or not. So if I did, forgive me for repeating the story. Several years ago, when my daughter was 10, so that would be about 17 years ago, I took her to China because she is from China. She was born in Shanghai, China. I adopted her when she was 1. And when she was 10, I wanted her to take her back so that she could get to know China. And one morning, I think we were actually in Shanghai at the time. One morning, I got up in our hotel room and went to the bathroom. And after I went to the bathroom, I washed my hands. And then after I washed my hands, I reached out for the towel, which was on a towel ring, dried my hands, put the towel back on the towel ring. And when I put the towel back on the towel ring, I felt this incredible love coming from the towel ring. And when I say incredible, I mean incredible. A very blissful, joyous love. kind of goes beyond. I was looking to see if I could compare it to anything, but there's nothing I can really compare it to. It was just this blissful, joyous love coming from the towel rack, and it kind of filled me up, right? And I became very joyous. And so I went into the main part of the hotel room and I turned on Chinese MTV and I began dancing. And as I was dancing, I could feel that same incredible love coming from the floor. And that's when I realized that everything in my language, everything is spirit, or everything is God, not just the living things, but the inanimate objects as well, like the chair I'm sitting in, the glasses that are on my face, the clothing that I'm wearing, the tea that I'm sipping, and the cup that I'm holding, everything. And so the true enlightened master sees in this way. And when you see in this way, what you really see is the Tao everywhere. So even though on the one hand we say there are leaders and there are followers, there are those who snort with displeasure and those who boast with pride, etc., etc. Within all of that and beyond all of that, there is only the Tao. You could say, we see with the eyes of the world, and those are the things that we see, or we see with the eyes of God, and God is what we see. So sages, of course, want to see with the eyes of God. And that leads us to the next sentences, which tell us what sages do in order to see with the eyes of God instead of with the eyes of the world. To be not of the world, sages remove their own extremes. Sages remove their own extravagance. Sages remove their own arrogance. Because sages let go of their own ego, because it's through the ego, through the sense of I am this person, these beliefs are not only my beliefs, but they're true because I'm right. Instead of, if I see through the ego, then I see a world of egos. And I'm going to see some people as leaders, some as followers, some snorting with displeasure, some boasting with pride, some struggling, some gaining, some oppressing, or some being oppressed and some conquering. But if I let go of my ego, then I am that which is egoless. And so I see with egoless eyes. Now, this is a very short formula for how to let go of ego. Let go of our own extremes, let go of our own extravagance, let go of our own arrogance. So, what are these three things that we're letting go of? The extremes could be the extremes of emotion, the extremes of thought, and also the extremes of action. So, for example, believing that somebody is trying to control me and I'm angry about that. I'm pissed off about that, believing all of the thoughts that come into my mind about that person and how they're trying to control me, feeling all that emotion. What would I feel? Resentment, anger, fear that they might be successful, and then acting out in the world based on those thoughts. That's an example of living by my own extremes. So sages watch for these extremes. And one way that you can recognize an extreme is it's anything other than equanimity, being centered, right? Being consistently content with a sense of well-being. That's being in the center. So extremes are to go off in the negative or to go off in the positive in an excited or agitated way. So sages watch within themselves for these extremes and they let them go. What does that mean that they let them go or they remove them? What that really means is that they don't believe them. They don't identify with them. They also don't deny them. They see them and they feel them when it's emotion, right? They see them and they feel them, but they recognize that it's of the ego. It's of the world. And their purpose is of the Tao. And so they become the watchful presence and they allow those energies to move through the mind and the body without believing them, without taking action on them. And eventually, because these energies are not believed or they're not brought into manifestation by taking action on them, they begin to weaken, they begin to weaken, and then they fade. So that's what it means when it says sages remove their own extremes. What about sages remove their own extravagance? Extravagance could be described as wasteful or indulgent behavior. Extravagance could be being overly attached to material items, overly attached to pleasures like the pleasure of eating tasty food. It could even be overly interested in romance, travel. It's a very outward interest. It doesn't bring one inward to be centered and in touch with the Tao. It's like my pleasure, my happiness, my ambition, my ultimate desire, that which quenches my thirst is out there. And sages don't want to have an out there stature. If I am out there, I am going to be focused on the world, not on God. And so sages notice what is a part of their personality's tendencies. They keep them very outward focused, and they learn to bring the focus back in. So instead of believing that romance is my ultimate salvation, I bring my attention back to God. Romance may happen or romance may not happen, but my attention stays with God. Travel may happen or travel may not happen, but my attention stays with God. It's about being focused inward instead of outward, and letting however this life unfolds unfold without me craving, right? Craving outwardly. That's how sages remove their own extravagance. Sages remove their own arrogance. Of course, that's just thinking, I'm the greatest thing there is. I'm better than everybody else. I'm smarter than everybody else. I'm more talented than everybody else. I'm more beautiful than everybody else. Whatever. I'm more right than everybody else. Sages watch for those kinds of ideas, and they know those kinds of ideas are going to keep them seeing the world instead of seeing God, because that is, you could say, the thought of separation. Even if it's a different type of arrogance, even if it's the type of arrogance that says, I'm less than everybody else. I'm not as good as the others. I'm not as talented as the others. I'm definitely uglier than the others. That specialness, that I'm different than, is arrogance, whether it goes to the positive or the negative. And when I see with the eyes of God, what I see and know is only the Tao. Or we could say what I see and know is the oneness of all things. And I can't separate myself out with either positive or negative arrogance and see the oneness of all things. So sages remove their own arrogance. As far as translating this, there was one line that was kind of interesting to translate. I'm going to share that line with you. It's the one where I said, perhaps some snort with displeasure and some boast with pride. Let's look at those Chinese characters. So these are the Chinese characters. And you'll notice the first and the third character are the same. That is this particular character. That could be or, either, else, perhaps, maybe. And I went with perhaps. So we have perhaps, and then the next character means blow through nose or snort. One dictionary I saw also offered sigh as an option, like, oh, right, sigh. Perhaps blow through nose or snort. Perhaps, and then blow again. Blow or puff, brag or boast. So this was something I really had to contemplate before I could translate it. It's almost as if it said, perhaps blow, perhaps blow, or you could say either blow or blow, right? What does that mean? Well, it's interesting. Well, look at how some others translated this. It's interesting because, for example, this particular translation says they inhale, they exhale. That's how this particular translator handled that. This translator said they either blow hot or cold. And this particular translator said sometimes you need to blow hard and sometimes you can breathe easily. And this translator said some breathe in through the nose and some blow out through the mouth. So different translators handled that differently after their contemplation. But what I really focused on, even though blow was in both places, what I really focused on were the other words that were there along with blow. And in the first case, the word snort was there. I'm not going to snort for you. I don't know if I can snort on command. I don't want to blow anything out of my nose. Sometimes I accidentally snort while laughing. It happens, right? But what we were looking at is we were looking at these particular, kind of the rhythm of this particular part of this chapter. We were looking at opposites. We had leaders and followers. We had those who struggle and those who gain. We had those who are oppressed and those who conquer. So this told me that these two blows were somehow opposites. And when I looked at the second blow, one of the options that could go along with it was to boast. When I looked at the first blow again, the option was to snort. And so I contemplated those two words, snort and boast. And boast seems to be very happy with myself, very happy with what I have. Again, I think I'm better than everybody else, but look at my beautiful things, right? Look where I live, very happy with. And so that made me think of snorting as snorting with displeasure because it's the opposite. I'm snorting because I'm not happy with my things. I'm not happy with where I live. I think it should be different. So that's how I made my particular decision. But as you can tell by looking at the different translations I shared with you, other people handled those two different blows, perhaps blow, a little differently. So I'm going to read my translation through one more time. We'll look at one more translation all the way through, and then we'll look at an assignment. I wish I could snort for you on command because it's kind of, I kind of blew through my nose, but when I really, snorting kind of has a vocal sound to it too, right? I don't know. I can't do it. Why don't you try? See if you can snort with displeasure. Oh, I see like this man pig face snorting with displeasure. He has a hat on and a suit, but it's a pig, That's the cartoon image that comes up in my mind when I use the word snort. All right, let me read. There are those who want to take over the world and control it. I understand they will not succeed. The world is a sacred vessel. Remember, it's God's tool or Spirit's tool, and it cannot be controlled. Those who try to control it will be defeated. Those who try to hold it will lose it. In the world, perhaps there are leaders and followers. Perhaps some snort with displeasure and some boast with pride. Perhaps some struggle and some gain. Perhaps some are oppressed and some conquer. To be not of the world, sages remove their own extremes. Sages remove their own extravagance. Sages remove their own arrogance. All right, let's pick out and look at one more translation of this. So let's look at Derek Lynn from 1994. We've looked at Derek Lynn before. Those who wish to take the world and control it, I see that they cannot succeed. The world is a sacred instrument. One cannot control it. The one who controls it will fail. The one who grasps it will lose. Either lead or follow, either blow hot or cold, either have strength or weakness, either have ownership or take by force. Therefore, the sage eliminates extremes, eliminates excess, eliminates arrogance. And then below, there's even a more modern English translation. It doesn't say it's not by Derek Lynn, so it might be, it must be, but this is not in the book that I have by Derek Lynn, but let's read it as well. There are those who want to meddle with the world or the environment. They want to control it, manipulate it, and interfere with it. What I observe is that they cannot possibly achieve what they desire. The world is a sacred thing beyond the insignificant power of mere mortals. None of us can control the world. Those who try will fail, and those who hang on to it and refuse to let go will still lose their grip. In nature, all things live in balance with one another. Some of them lead while others follow. Some blow air to impart warmth, while others do so to cool things down. Some are strong while others are weak. Some occupy their own niche in the environment, while others survive by force and violence. Because the Tao is all about balance, the sage, seeking to emulate nature, will seek the same balance through moderation. He or she will eliminate from his or her life anything that is extreme or intemperate. The sage will also avoid any excess or wasteful extravagance. And lastly, the sage will let go of thoughts and behaviors that are arrogant or ego-driven. So I don't know if that last, more modern translation was also Derek Lin. I found it on the internet listed as Derek Lin 1994, but like I said, that is not in my Derek Lin book, so I can't say for sure. All right, so what is our assignment? Last time you kind of picked your own assignment. I think we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to pick our own assignment, but we're going to be looking at this last paragraph where it says, sages remove their own extremes. Sages remove their own extravagance. Sages remove their own arrogance. So we'll pick one of those and we'll start working on that. I don't expect you between now and the next video to have fully removed extremes, extravagance, or arrogance, but we'll begin working on that. So for example, if you choose sages remove their own extremes, you're going to pay attention for anything in you that is not centered equanimity. Centered contentment, centered sense of well-being, anything that goes off into excited or agitated. And when you see those thoughts and those emotions, you want to attempt to watch them without acting on them. You'll feel the emotion, you'll hear the thoughts, but you want to stay in watching and allow them to play out inside the body and mind without following them and playing them out in the world. So that's what you'll do if you choose extremes. If you choose extravagance, then you're going to want to look for where you are craving or seeking outwardly. Look for something strong like, eating. A lot of people pick eating. Are you just eating all this stuff all the time trying to satisfy yourself? Or is, money, watching the stock market constantly, or trying to get romance constantly on those apps, trying to find the right person? Where is your outward seeking energy that within your own intuition is not healthy? And can you start to let go, pick one, can you start to let go of that by turning instead inward, by placing your attention, your desire, your focus inward? And this can also involve watching, just like with the extremes, because what happens when we crave outwardly is it creates like an addiction in the body somehow, in the body and mind. So whether it's food or, stock market or romance or travel or something else, buying clothes, buying purses, shoes. When we attempt to reel that back in and bring our attention more inward, it's almost like we have DTs. There's like the craving wants to be satisfied. And so what we will also need to do is watch that craving. Do our best to watch it, allow it to be without jumping up and grabbing the Twinkie or grabbing the computer and selling and buying stocks again, or grabbing the computer and buying more shoes, or whatever it is that we do. If you choose arrogance, you're going to be looking for where you think you are better or worse than others, and consistently believing that. One example is most of us think that we are right. My political opinions are right. How I think you should be in your life is right. So you could just look for that idea of, I am the one that's right here. But there may be other ways that this arrogance shows up for you. And what you want to attempt to do is to look at those ideas of arrogance and realize these are ideas of separation. This is why I see a world instead of seeing God in all things. And then ask, do I want to maintain this position of arrogance? This position of I'm different than, whether it's better than or worse than? Or is this something I'm willing to let go of in order to see God in all things? It's like A Course in Miracles says, would you rather be right or happy? So that's it for chapter 29. Next time I see you, we'll go back on to chapter 30. Enjoy picking your assignment and following through with it to the best of your ability. Until I see you again. Bye.